Welcome to the Eyes of Indigo with your infinitely curious hosts, Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Our show is broadcast live at 9:30 p.m. Wednesdays. Socio-spiritual topics are laced with humor as we discuss weird stuff in a rational way. Learn more about us in our first episode, The Prequel. Shows are recorded and available on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, and other aggregators. A keyword searchable index is at iriscarter.com/EOI directory. Share ideas and comments in the program chat or by email. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our show. Let us know you're here by typing your hello in the comments because we are thrilled to welcome you as we begin another adventure right now.
Hello.
Hello. Wow, technology is still being weird all over the planet. Right before it launched, it started flickering like an old film. And it came back up and you were there and you said, hello. And I'm like, hi. It was like an old-fashioned film thing, flutter, flicker. And I'm like, God, technology.
At least it didn't burn a hole, right? Remember how it used to?
Oh, yeah. It would all melt away. I remember watching that happen lots of times. My dad was a film fanatic. Reel to reel. Yeah, had stacks of reels everywhere. Well, wow. I can see my name on the screen. Can you see your name on the screen?
Yes, I can see my name on the screen.
I don't see
Move your mouse. Move your mouse.
There it goes. Yay!
Sometimes if your mouse is anywhere near it, it drops it for whatever reason, but I don't think it happens for anybody else. It's weird.
It was like, it was 2 inches away. That's pretty cool. Hi, guys.
Yeah, we have an audience, we hope. But you have to let us know. We need to see your names.
You have to type for us. Hi, guys. I'm Margot. This is Iris. For those of you that are listening in the future on audio cast versus visual, now you know who the two voices are.
Yeah.
The lilting sound of my voice. Follow the sound. So tonight we have an interesting topic that is so complicated that we had to really narrow it down.
Yeah. And then we're still going, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, because it can go in right now at this point in history, it can go in so many directions. Plus, we have to be mindful of not getting banned or soft banned for saying keywords and terms on the air. So, yeah, we have that on top of it being complicated in the first place. But let's start from the top. Iris, what are we talking about tonight?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Where we're going with this. So tonight we are going to talk about human rights. And the description that we gave out was equality between the races, sexual identities, religions, and other individual identifiers is always in question. Somebody's always bringing up shit. I didn't put that on the description, but that's what I thought. Yet, the rights of humanity at large is a topic that seems to get buried. Are we truly free, or are we a commodity? And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And there's lots of contradicting information, controversial information, and things that
suppressed information, debunked information.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
All right. So we decided to focus more on the end of that statement, which is essentially, are U.S. citizens a commodity? Of who? Or are we actually still sovereign citizens coming out of 1777 when we, in theory, broke off from the British throne? And obviously a lot of stuff ties into that: identity, gender differences, religious differences, racial differences, or perceived differences. And actually that could be a whole nother show, which I have a lot of commentary on. So we'll just write that on the list, Iris. Perceived differences in race, gender, and religion, and that is gender, race, gender, and religion. But anyway, we're talking about whether or not U.S. citizens are sovereign or enslaved. Just to generally make a clear statement about it, it is more complex than that, as we mentioned. However, we also went down the path of collecting a few videos and or links so that in your own free time after the show, you can delve further into what is often said by reputable, what we call truthers or conspiracy researchers or suppressed reporters or whatever you want to call them. So we're happy to rattle off some of those resources. You can check it out for yourself. And we encourage you to come up with your own conclusions. The advice I like to throw in behind that is, and be, I guess, open-minded to whatever conclusions you come up with can also get changed in the future. Having a hard set stance on any one view of reality is a recipe for ultimate failure eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Being aware that reality by nature is a fluid thing, the only constant is change. And that includes changing your conclusions about what is reality in the first place. Ooh, which is a big one. So why don't we just talk about what is God, Iris? I mean, we're kind of going there.
Yeah, and what is reality? Are we just figments of our own imagination?
Are we Newtons of our own imagination cookies?
You have cookies. Come to the other side.
On the dark side, we have cookies. Are we Fig Newtons of our own imagination? Just to answer that question, yes, we are. And the other answer that's just as valid is 42. That is a reference to a movie.
And yeah, you tell me, oh yeah, the galaxy.
The answer to everything is always 42. Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Hitchhiker's Guide is that movie. So, circling back to what we're talking about, the crux of legal documents that fuel the discussion about whether or not U.S. citizens are chattel, property, slaves of a bigger entity, legally known as a corporation, comes from debate over 12 pages of a document that was created in 1871 and executed in 1870, not created, executed, put into action in 1871. Not saying the actual name of it because we're trying not to get censored.
Oh, and maybe I should read this thing about.
Please do.
Yeah, there is an article on Wikipedia about I'll just say it's in Wikipedia, sovereign citizen movement. Okay. And the movement is I love this, is a loose group of litigants, anti-government activists, tax protesters, financial scammers, and conspiracy theorists based mainly in the United States. Sovereign citizens have their own pseudo-legal belief system based on misinterpretation of common law and claim to not be subject to any government statutes unless they consent to them. The movement, which appeared in the early 1970s, is American in origin, and they go on and have to repeat that it's in the U.S. And it's one of, let's see, and then it talks about pseudo law again. And they say, what I loved is they claim that the federal government is illegitimate, argue the concept of individual sovereignty in opposition to the idea of federal citizens, who they say have unknowingly forfeited their rights by accepting some aspect of federal law. While the sovereign citizen movement was originally associated with white supremacism and anti-Semitism, it now attracts people of various ethnicities, including a significant number of African Americans. The majority of sovereign citizens are not violent. Now, this is the kicker. However, methods advocated by the movement are certainly illegal. They have been found guilty of offenses such as tax evasion, hostile possession, forgery, threat against public officials, bank fraud, check fraud, traffic violations. Let's see, because some have engaged in armed confrontations with law enforcement, the FBI classifies sovereign citizen extremists as domestic terrorists. Terry Nichols, one of the perpetrators of the Oklahoma City bombing, subscribed to a variation of sovereign citizen ideology. Representatives of U.S. law enforcement ranked the risk of terrorism from sovereign citizen movement higher than the risk from any other group, including Islamic extremists, militias, racist skinheads, neo-Nazis, and radical environmentalists. And in Australia, they've identified some sovereign citizens as potential terrorist threats.
So people who are interested in the sovereignty of the United States, we are more dangerous in terms of being terrorists than skinheads, neo-Nazis, and Islamic extremists. Well, last time I checked, I don't even really know anybody under those words, much less am I one. Yeah.
And one of the things I said is I don't consider myself an extremist or conspiracy theorist, although I could see where some people might think I am. And I certainly don't consider myself a sovereign, whatever the hell it was. But I want to learn more about it. I want to have more clarity. Does that make me a terrorist? Just because I'm sitting here going,
right.
why the fuck is the tax department taking more taxes from me? I'm not saying anything. I'm paying what I owe, but I'm just going, I'm asking questions.
Asking questions, and they throw you under the bus, as that thing's summarized. Loosely organized was the opening statement. And I'm like,
it's
really?
Loosely organized, not dangerous, but the FBI
But they're a bunch of extremist terrorists. But so they're contradicting themselves to self-pedal and cover their asses legally. Loosely organized is bullshit. If you want to look at just one faction, the whole Trump administration, that's not loosely organized at all. If you know much about the Q movement, nowhere near loosely organized. That's a pretty damn tight ship. That's just in the first sentence. So anyway, pseudo legal. Oh my God, do you know how many judges and attorneys are in this? Like thousands. Sitting judges and active attorneys, okay, as well as former, and also the military. We haven't even touched on that. What is the difference between military law and the maritime law that the United States functions under now? Two totally separate entities, which means all of JAG, J-A-G, what does JAG stand for? Attorney General, something, Judge Attorney General, something like that. JAG, she'll find it. But anyway, yeah, military, nowhere near unorganized.
Judge Advocate General.
Judge Advocate General. So, yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the beginning of that wonderful quote that you read there, Iris, gives you a really good view of how, let's just call it satanic, they think we are. I mean, yeah, all those lovely adjectives.
Take one to know one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is classic for them to actually accuse the 99% of what the 1% actually does. Now, while we're talking, I saw, Iris, that you and I are skipping over something very important in this conversation. We need to define what is a sovereign citizen. We're sitting here talking about sovereignty, and we're sitting here talking about enslavement, and we haven't defined what those two things are.
So
So,
do you have the definition ready?
I can talk about it off the top of my head.
Go ahead.
A person who is in enslavement is someone who can only live, function, move, buy, sell, consume, and possess or have children or any of those functions by permission granted by a higher power or a higher authority. Okay,
Which is basically a slave versus a free person, right?
A free person, yeah. Literally, a slave can only function and or own or refuse. It can accept or refuse anything, own anything or not, or dispose of anything based on permission by somebody else. And that means the food you eat, where you sleep, your home, your job, your vehicle, your own children, whether or not you have a spouse, your parents, ownership or not of you, because you were a child at some point, all that is decided by permission granted or denied by someone else that has more authority than the slave does over their life and their activities. A sovereign person is entirely independent of all that shit. In a nutshell, a sovereign person, if you look up what the word sovereign means, yeah, Iris, do you have that? Literally, in legal terms, it literally means somebody who is not under the jurisdiction of any other entity except for themselves.
Okay, according to the
completely
Oxford
independent.
languages, well, a sovereign, no, that's not it. Wait a minute. What is the true sovereign definition of meaning? Let's go to Merriam-Webster. A sovereign is one possessing or held to possess supreme political power. That's not it. Let's see.
Generally speaking.
Sovereign power. Sovereign has everything to do with power. It often describes a person who has supreme power or authority, such as a king or queen. God is described as sovereign in a number of Bible translations. The word sovereign also often describes power. To have sovereign powers, to have absolute power, power that cannot be checked by anyone or anything. Nations and states are sometimes described as sovereign. This means that they have power over themselves. Their government is under their own control rather than the control of an outside authority. So apply that to humans. A sovereign being is someone that has government of themselves, not
without any outside of authority.
Right.
Right. So that is what this movement is about, is trying to return U.S. citizens, and Australians apparently get in on the act, and so do Canadians, and so do Mexican citizens and Caribbean citizens. Gee, all in proximity, relatively speaking, to the United States, of trying to get back to individual sovereignty of each individual, meaning they can't put tax on you, they can't obligate you, but and then, okay, so the rollout of that is the initial uneducated view of what is sovereign is sometimes a cause for panic on people that don't understand the bigger picture of what else happens in a sovereign citizen situation. What do you mean people don't pay taxes? What do you mean there's no law? People can run around doing illegal stuff all over the place? No, that's not how it works. That's an oversimplification that they want you to think that that's what sovereignty would look like. No, that's not what it looks like. There are still, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but to close it up a little bit and not leave it hanging, there are laws in place that the sovereign people agree to follow because of a consensus to when they created those laws, okay? And the sovereign person agrees that that is within their sovereignty and they agree to it. So there's more to, I'm independent and I don't have to do whatever the hell y'all can't tell me what to do. It's not that simple. All right. So that's an oversimplification by design, all right, to make it panicky. So coming back to what we're talking about, why are we concerned about the US government, or why is there talk about the US government making people, I guess the word would be unsovereign? Talking about Mount Malaprops here. There was a controversial document executed concerning the Capitol, the 10-mile square area that's considered the capital of the United States. And that being the head of all US government in that area. And there is one school of thought that says that this particular 1871 document turned the US government from serving the citizens, being in service to the citizens, to being a corporation that owns the citizens. They use a lot of evidence to show that up front. Two pieces out of hundreds of pieces of evidence. Two pieces are the Constitution, the name of the US Constitution got changed from the Constitution for the United States to the Constitution of the United States. Sidebar, it behooves you to look into legal terminology. That one little change of to for is a big deal. For the United States is the people. The words United States is the legal term for the citizens. So the Constitution was for the citizens, collectively called United States. It got changed to Constitution of the United States, which means it's a corporation, and you got to find out what the word of means. What it did is it took the Constitution away from being in service to the United States. Okay. Instead, it governs it in a totally different way. Again, we're going to give you resources to dig into this further details. So there's also this, I said there's two major pieces. The other piece that tells you more about legalese is when something is capitalized, such as birth certificates or certificates of live birth. There's two documents generated when you were born. That happens to most people in the last 150 years. And one is a document you keep. Certificate of live birth is typically what you get. And a birth certificate is what goes into what some people call the Corporation of America, which becomes an international trade, because what they keep calling us, another word for slave, is chattel. And that is a corporate term. Your chattel is your product, is the property that you own as a that a corporation owns, not you. Chattel is property that a corporation owns. So if the United States is a corporation, then it owns all its citizens, and the citizens can only do stuff by permission, which means you have to pay. You have to pay taxes, you have to pay for licenses, you have to pay for certification, you have to pay and pay and pay for food, for transportation, you have to pay to travel, to have an internet, to have a passport, to pay for gas, to pay for vehicles. And if you dig into this far enough, you find out that you actually have no ownership of your own children. as well from the second that everybody signs the birth certificate and later on the certificate of live birth. Your name is capitalized, and when your name is capitalized on those documents, you are now property. If your name is in upper and lower case, then you're looking at a different document.
There's an article I found. It says your legal name is the name that the government likes to use to attach your identity. It's like a set of fictitious characteristics to it. It allows the government to identify you. It's not your legal name is not the name given to you by your mother and father. Instead, it's a name created by the government to make it easier for you to do business with its corporations. However, the government likes to use your legal name as a tool to control you. So, your legal name is the name of a corporation created under your given name. The government uses your legal name to attach you to a dead fictional character. So most of
You're
us have been
human.
conditioned to think
You're not counted as a human, is what she just
Right.
said. You're not a human. Yeah.
Each of us is a living man or woman with a body made of flesh and blood. Names are not real people who are living and breathing, but are symbols of things. Names in legal terms are designations of artificial persons
Abstract.
known as corporations. Your legal name is a corporate name, but it's not who you really are.
So you're an individual corporation that the corporation of you, a little corporation that the bigger corporation owns. You're a subsidiary of the United States, is what they're kind of saying. You're a franchise, but you're not going to gain from it. All the profit goes to them.
And just a little bit of history. Way back, people kept records of their own families. And I remember, like, we had a big family Bible
Yes.
that they would write the names in. And that was, you can still, like, if you have a great grandmother that's still alive and doesn't have a birth certificate, you can take this page out of the family Bible that shows her name and her date of birth, and the government will accept that as documentation of her birth. Now, if
Because
the
that's the way
government will accept that, how come that's not enough? The government already does a census every 10 years of the numbers of people. Why do they need a certificate showing how people are connected and who their parents are and the family tree and all that stuff? I know
Why do they need to know that?
my birth certificate has how many live births my mother had before me, how many miscarriages, how many this, how many that. And I was like, what the hell? I got her whole medical record on here. What's that all about? It's my birth certificate. And
yes, there's a bunch of crazy information on there that's only valuable to them. Yeah.
And I'm not sure what happens when somebody's born at home. What do they have to do? You know,
they
a lot of people
they register. It's delayed by a couple of days, but they still do the same registration.
Another thing is I have, and I was going to find a picture before the show, and I didn't have a chance. My mother's original folder that her Social Security card came in, and this would have been like in the 40s or something. Mom was born in 33, and when she got her Social Security card, there's a cover that tells you what your Social Security card is and is not. And it specifically says on there that this is a number to be used only in connection with the Social Security department. It is not intended as a government ID. It is not intended to be used as an ID for any other purpose other than to link you to your Social Security benefits.
Yep.
Yet the government uses it for every form of ID.
That's pretty much your name.
Yeah, and I used to work with an insurance company where when employers, we had all these employers, and an employer would hire somebody new, and we'd create a medical ID card for them, and we usually just based it off their social security number. We just kept that record connected because the employers already had their social security. And I remember several times an employer would call and go, "This person doesn't want to give their social security number." I said, "That's fine. We just made up a number and gave it to them." And assigned them an individual number so we could keep up with their record for insurance purposes. But so it really didn't matter to us whether people had social security numbers or not. And I always thought it was admirable that they recognized that they didn't have to use their social security number.
Exactly. Your social security number is attached to all of your bank accounts, to all of your insurance accounts, your health insurance, your home insurance, your car insurance, every single one of your medical records, every single physician or healthcare provider. They all have or had it. Same, your kids, your spouse, everybody, all of your employers. They also require a copy of it as well. Yeah, you're right. It has gone way, way past Social Security, decades ago. I remember I was 12 years old when I applied for my Social Security card. And then by about the 80s or 90s? When did you have your children? In the 80s?
I had my daughter in 86.
Did she do social?
No, 89. I got me. When
Did they have?
No, I had her in 86 and had my son in 89, and both of them were automatically, their social security card was applied for automatically. And
Yeah,
I was like,
at birth.
I got it, they were a month old, and I was like, what the hell? I mean, I knew it was coming, but it was just weird.
Yeah, they're telling you, yep, we own this one too. And we didn't know that. It's not like our parents knew. And this has to do with maritime law, versus common law, which are two different things. And then there's military law, which is a third thing. Again, this gets really, really complicated. So, coming back, that is actually what people that are seeking sovereign citizenship, they're trying to defeat the corporation that was created in 1871. They're trying to defeat their control of citizenship by forcing them to show all this dark agenda, hidden banking agenda, monetization of citizens. Each person is worth millions of dollars. A United States citizen is worth several hundreds of millions because you will spend, borrow, and get loans on cars and houses and have children much more likely than, say, a third world individual in, let's say Somalia. That person is probably only worth a few thousand on this particular trade market because they won't buy a college education loan and expensive houses and expensive cars the way a Westerner would. So that makes you very, very valuable as a Westerner. Eventually, the theory is you're eventually going to see the record of how many times you were traded and sold and what you're actually worth. Well, your fake identity, your representational identity. And in theory, all that money will come back to you. That's the theory that a lot of people are hoping for. It's exciting because we are talking about millions and millions per person. Okay, not chump change. So part of where I was going with that was circling back around to how the hell does somebody in 1871 turn the United States over to a corporation? Oh, a third popular way to see where the corporation shows up. There's a gold fringe on the edge of the American flag when it's flying in Washington, D.C., and in a few other places. The United States flag does not have a gold fringe. It is red and white, 13 stripes, and 50 white stars on a blue field in the upper left-hand corner. That is it, and that is all. That gold fringe is a representation of the flag for the corporation. Without the fringe is the original U.S. government. So that's another visual. Like I said, there's hundreds of little symbols and legal stuff. Military law gets in here too. So anyway, why and how does and who, what is this corporation? Who did this in 1871 and how? What precipitated that? What precipitated that was the Civil War. The United States went bankrupt in 1865, 66. And they were screwed for money. The war cost way, way, way too much. We also know that, so this is mainstream fact, that Great Britain, the throne at the time, financed both sides of the war. They financed both the North and the South, so to speak, to keep us fighting. A divided country is easier to take advantage of. It's weaker. Okay, it's
but it
much
was
weaker.
interesting because France was involved. I mean, yeah, the British were also fighting France at the same time, which is something they really don't ever cover in history. Because I always thought it was fascinating. That's why the British lost, was because they were so confounded with dealing with Napoleon that
they had two fronts to fight on. But France was not our friend either. It looks, the history tries to make it look like they were, but no, France had the same vested interest to watch for the United States to fall apart. Their interest, where do you think Louisiana came from? Who do you think had that first? Just as a tickler, okay? France has had and has a vested interest in the United States back then. So the Civil War ended officially, but the United States government was bankrupt as hell. The attorneys and bankers coming out of London and the Vatican, but that's a whole nother discussion, coming out of London said, hey, we will pay your bills, put you back up, give you enough money, rebuild, but we own you. Quietly. We don't want another war. We don't want the American Revolution from 100 years ago to happen again. So we are going to quietly change a few legal words on your big legal documents, U.S. Constitution, and what's the other one? Bill of Rights, and a few other things. And we're going to foot the bill until you're back up on your feet, and then you're going to keep going as our little fat cash cow, quietly. So who owns the United States? The 13 richest families that own all the banks that bought and paid off the debts in the United States for the Civil War bankruptcy that the government was experiencing.
The Fed, the federal.
That became, yes, that's where the word the Fed of the federal government came from. That's another name for the corporation. Is
what's
the
it
Fed.
called? Not the Fed, the
U.S. Federal Reserve.
Yes, the Federal Reserve.
Yeah,
because it's not a federal government agency. They're supposedly run by Congress, but their board tells Congress what they're going to do, and Congress rubber stamps it. Hello. And that is easy to find.
That's easy to find, and that's easy to do because when you own all the money in the world, you can pay Congress whatever you want to rubber stamp whatever laws you want when you own all the money in the world. So yeah, look at your dollar bills, your $10, your 20s, your hundreds, they all say U.S. Federal Reserve. That is a privately owned company. Please do the research. If you want to know who used to have it before the Reserve, that's called the U.S. Treasury. And the U.S. Federal Reserve was telling the Treasury what to do. The orange man that was in office, well, not so recently, a couple of years ago, he switched it. And now the Treasury controls the Federal Reserve. So that's why you keep hearing loose tinklings about how the economy is going to crash and that the stock market keeps gradually turning down and down and down. New currency is supposed to come out. There's a lot of controversy about digital currency versus paper currency. By the way, you do not want to go all digital. That means every single purchase everywhere that you ever make is tracked and controlled by someone else that you never met, and they can stop you completely at any second when all your money is digital. Think about it. Most people don't think about the fact that if all your coins and all your money is digits on a cell phone or on a computer screen, and they cut you off, they turn off your account, they turn off your power, they do whatever, you have no means to survive with money. You're going to be straight barter for what services you can provide and hope that your landlord is okay with that, which isn't the case most of the time. Yeah, you want to keep a cash society, in the very least, a partial cash society. So anyway, there's, like we said, there's lots of branches to this that get very, very complicated very fast. But that's part of it. That's part of the U.S. Reserve. That's part of the corporation trying to control the masses even more. If you control three things. If you can control three things, you can control society. Their monetary system, their guns, another word for that is military, their guns and ammo, which is why they're all big about scaring us into giving up guns. And the other thing is your media. Control the media, what your citizens see and hear in entertainment and news, television, internet, books, newspapers, all that. If you control those three things, you own that citizenry. And that is what the fight is over: controlling the media, controlling who has guns, and controlling who pushes the bank buttons, which is the hardest one. That's furthest behind. That's the furthest man behind the curtain, is he not, Iris, in a lot of ways? Because banking details are conversations that most of us never had. Most of us are financially illiterate.
Well, one of my most favorite movies is called The Big Short. And it's about the banking collapse in 2008, where and some savvy people figured out that mortgages were getting ready to collapse, that the banking system had set themselves up to where they no longer had all AAA mortgages, rated mortgages and all, and the bonds and stuff that they had built and the CDs that they had built were built with crap, and these people were not going to be able to make their mortgages, and it was just all going to collapse. And it did. And so some of these people bet against it, and the banks were laughing like, what the hell are you doing? Well, if you're willing to create it, I'm going to pay you all this money and we'll just see what happens. And then they ended up making billions of dollars off of the collapse of the banking system.
Because they bet the other way. Yeah.
But
they invested the other way.
The way the movie opens, and the movie's very accurate, and it's based on a book written by one of these people that was in the middle of all of this. It says there's like a narrator, and it says, the banking system was very boring, and you didn't get into banking to make money until the 70s, when this one guy said, who doesn't pay their mortgage? If we put these together, then you have a bond to invest in. If we take all these mortgages and lump them together in a bond, it's a way for people to invest and get a return on their money from the interest. It was a way for the banks to make money and the people that were investing in them to make money, all this stuff. Great. It took off. Well, then eventually they ran out there's only a limited number of mortgages. So then it was, well, let's group more together, or we can sprinkle in some of the bad mortgages. And they kind of had like bonds upon bonds. It was like they were double dipping and all this stuff. And then at one point in the housing market, they were back in the 2000s, they were letting anybody get a mortgage. And people had multiple mortgages on property or multiple properties, and
Right.
and then all of a sudden, they would get these balloon payments.
Mortgages, yeah, on purpose.
And they'd get these balloon payments and then just walk away from their mortgage, and they started getting all these foreclosures. And the housing market went up, 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 and people couldn't afford to buy new houses, couldn't afford their mortgages they had, and it all collapsed. But they said the whole thing, they said, and as they were describing all this, they said, and if all this sounds confusing to you, it's meant to be confusing to you. They want to think that they're the only ones in control, and they don't want you to know what they're doing. And I thought, man, that sounds so typical.
Housing and finance is intentionally made to be very, and legalese too, court matters, is all by design to dissuade you from looking into it too far. Absolutely.
And they were saying, like, some guys they talked to about, well, who do you sell to? Who do you give loans to? Do the banks even check on these loans? Because these guys were like brokers. And they said, the banks don't care. We write a mortgage on Friday afternoon. On Monday morning, it's approved. And they said, so you're just, and they said, oh, well, personally, I love immigrants because they don't understand what the hell I'm talking about. And they'll sign anything. They're just excited to get a house.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah!
as long as you say yes. Yeah. Yeah. As long as y'all say yes, we don't care. Because we're ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
They trained us to be that way for generations, right? That's not just this generation or last generation thing. Our education system intentionally dumbs us down. How many people take a finance class before college or not even in college? Yeah. You're lucky if your home ec class taught you how to balance a checkbook. All right. And that's even if you took home ec or anywhere else close to that. So yeah, that's no. They stopped teaching U.S. constitutional law after the 70s. They did not want you to know what your rights are as a U.S. citizen, or what they used to be, or what you think they want you to know, whatever. You're not they stopped studying that as well. Wasn't it in the 70s you had to be able to quote certain parts of the Bill of Rights to graduate?
The preamble. I mean, well, they used to. I remember history teachers getting us to learn that, and
yeah,
we the people of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of the people, by the people, for the people, blah 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 blah. That hasn't been taught in decades. So in public school, not talking about private schools, in public schools. So long and short, the circling back around to something you asked me to talk about, Iris. The hot seat for all this, as you know, guys, is Washington, D.C. And the hot position that controls or is the main puppet that appears to control is the U.S. president and anybody associated to them. So recently, Iris asked me to bring up a conversation that I had with another person that I had in person with that person in a private setting. And yeah, out in the open in the middle of nowhere where nobody could hear us. It was kind of cool. And there was 4 of us. Okay, so it wasn't just me. There was witnesses. And where I'm going is this person had some comments about the state of the U.S. presidency is one way to say it. Their background, there are many people who constantly show proof that the U.S. president is, in fact, not an original person, but a clone and or actor or some sort of body double.
And we did a thing on clones a few weeks ago.
And we did that exactly. And we used the current person as one of the examples, between what he used to look like versus what he looks like now. Derek Johnson is a military law expert, and he explains in detail that January 20th was actually a military funeral and not a presidential inauguration. And he literally breaks it down. Go look him up. Derek Johnson, Derek Johnson. He's a good old boy from Texas, and his credentials are interesting. But what he has to say, he can prove it. He can cite, law section, page, paragraph, blah blah blah, of which law says that this is the way it is under military law. Reminder: military law is different from civilian law, which is different from maritime law. All right. So, or civilian common law, which is different from maritime law. So anyway, circling back, this is a little bit of throwover of the clone stuff. The person I talked to who had no motivation to deceive, it was a part of a bigger conversation. We were talking about what jobs we used to do. And he mentioned that he used to work in the military. I believe he said he was Air Force, for the White House as security. And we said, really? What'd you do? White House security. He said, oh, it was a long time ago, back in the 70s or 80s. And then he stopped and he said, no, it was the 80s. Yeah, it was the 80s when I did security. He said, but let me tell you this, because the further we talked, the more he figured out that I'm a conspiracy researcher. And he said, oh, dude, let me tell you this. He said, I did security outside of DC in Virginia at a remote location that they told us that it was a hospital and that we were doing security, military security, on a hospital. He said, you need to know. He said, I'm going to build this up for you. First of all, that hospital was in the middle of nowhere. There was no township, there was no village, there was no hamlet. This medical facility that they were calling a hospital was literally dozens and dozens of miles from anywhere. It was in the middle of BFE. Middle of BFE, bumfuck Egypt. Okay, for those that don't remember that word. Okay. They never told him what was going on in the hospital, but him and his colleagues, who were also guards, figured out that it was actually a clone hospital. Dun dun. And he was adamant about it. He said nobody ever went in, but people kept coming out in ambulances. They would leave in ambulances covered up, usually at night. And you would see nobody going in, and suddenly famous people were coming out. There's either a tunnel underneath, yet a whole nother discussion, or suddenly they originated there. And
didn't he say too there was a lot of black vans and SUVs?
Yes, a lot of discrete black vehicles coming in, helicopters, all of it, black glass panels, limos, all that. Nobody came in. People came out, and that was it. And so they figured out, just by deduction, that's a clone hospital, because it was definitely a medical facility. They definitely had that going on. And if you watch the commentary about what happens to clones, generally speaking, depending on the quality of the clone, they'll start breaking down anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. And 3 years is a long time. And we're talking about factory generated ones, not like Dolly the sheep, where you're an embryo and you're allowed to be born and you're a baby. And in 10 years, you're a 10-year-old. And in 20 years, you're a 20-year-old. That's not, we're talking about clones that are made, that are gestated and made into adult maturity in a matter of months or weeks.
I.e.,
Okay.
the sixth day with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Another reveal movie. Absolutely. Avatar. It's
Yeah.
another one. They can create you from test tube to full blown adult in a matter of months. So the quality of how of the clones determines how long it acts normal. Guys, Mitch McConnell talking, and somebody touched him, and he came back. That's a clone, and that lady was his handler. There's a really interesting discussion about what is a handler. Almost always it's a spouse, but it can be a secretary or close friend or a brother or sister. But it's usually a spouse. But clones start breaking down. They start not making sense. They talk in circles. Part of their features will start sagging. They act like they have strokes. Their physical body looks like a severe stroke. And eventually they collapse on the ground if you don't do something to help them medically. Therefore, you have hospitals to keep your clones going fresh and clear and revitalized, which starts a whole nother discussion about, do clones have souls? And if they don't, what happens to them? What are the ethics? What are the legalities of a clone? In other words, where I'm going with this is, if it is eventually revealed that our government has been run by clones for decades and that clones don't have legal rights as citizens, that means hundreds of thousands of laws are going to be repealed.
It'll be anarchy.
Which means Nasara Jasara will need to kick in. They've already revamped. If you want to know what that is, Nesara. Jasara is the same thing with a G, Gesara. One's United States, Nasara is national, Jasara is global version of humanitarian constitutional laws. Feel free to look that up. You will be shocked and surprised and have a lot of hope because it's all about sovereign citizens. So, in a reasonable, rational way. So, anyway, you know what, Iris? I believe it's Brazil that's already using Nasara Jasara laws. It's one of the countries that's already starting to do it. There's other minor countries around the world that are starting to do it. The rumor is the United States will be the last country to adopt these laws. So we'll see if that actually happens. But yeah, having that one-on-one conversation with somebody that says that they were aware of that back in the 80s. If cloning was that prolific in the 80s, who the hell have we been watching on the television all these years? Behind the podium and in front of those gold fringe flags.
Mm-hmm.
And the question comes up, are there, okay, so the bad guy, let's just say the bad guys do have clones. Are all clones bad? Are there only nefarious uses for clones? To deceive, to pretend to be somebody else, the original? Well, if you're trying to protect someone that's a good person, yeah, you're going to throw a clone out in front of the audience in case he gets shot and keep the original back. That is the popular theory behind Trump and his changing hair color. I said the name once.
Yeah. Well, and go watch our other show because we did a whole show and talked about a lot of that stuff. So yeah, definitely.
Silver
But
Trump, gold Trump, and an orange Trump.
With some of this. I haven't checked YouTube, but I was looking. My chat box is not available. So if anybody did comment, I might not have seen it, so I apologize if anybody did.
I've
Um,
seen nothing either. Yeah.
yeah, and I was going to put up a couple of links and can't, but I can go back. But I think we also gave names of things that people can look up if they want. What was that other guy's name?
Nick Alvear recently put out a movie that tells you everything that happens in a nutshell. Remember, this is complicated stuff, but he compacts it really well in about an hour and a half. The movie is called
Show on Earth.
The Greatest Show on Earth.
And
Look
give
it
his
up.
name again.
Nick Alvear, Alvear.
Okay.
And his credentials are really interesting too. Go check it
And you
out
can find him on Rumble. You can find him other places
on
too.
Good Lion Films. Good
Yeah.
Good Lion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Films. But rumble.com, you can find all this. Yeah.
And just to remind you, save the date. We've got the Healer Summit weekend coming up March 21st through
Yeah.
24th. It'll be on Emerald Isle, and we will be opening up registration October 1st, which is Sunday.
And all the details for it will come out at the same time. Questions welcome.
Yes.
Yay! We are excited for this.
I don't have the
with more and
preview
more
for
news.
next month done yet, so I'll get that done in the next day or two and post that as well. So, oh, here we go. Now I got my type in something.
Got one.
Very
There you. Hi, Donna.
Yeah. Thank you, Donna.
We see you.
Yay.
Yay! Thank you, little fur baby. So what's next
And
week's show?
I was almost tempted. I could preview the website if you want me to for our viewers.
You could give them a roll through.
Let me do this real quick, and yeah,
Sneak peek. So someday when you go and look, you'll know you're in the right place.
That's it, exactly. So yeah, that won't take but a second, and I'm coming over to do this, share in the stream, and make it full. It's going to be on my website, and we've got information about what it is with pictures of where we're going to be. And this, I've got to update the schedule, but we've got the whole schedule filled with all kinds of activities and presenters. And I'm going to add the biographies. I haven't done that yet. The rates, registration form, and then there are links for what the center is like and what's the expectations if you have questions, and then to make your payment. And so all of that is
coming out October 1.
Yes. So hope you will check it out and look for our notifications. We'll have it on Facebook and other places that registration is open. So yeah, you can take a deeper look at it. We're still putting together a few last minute details, but we'll have it ready.
Yeah, we will. What is next week's topic on the podcast?
I just said we don't have that schedule yet.
Oh, I'm thinking we're still September. That's October.
Yeah, I know.
It'll be announced on Facebook. I know.
Too many directions. And then I was on that thing last week where I was out of town, and so I just didn't have time to get to all this other stuff. But yeah, I'll get it together eventually. It all seems to work out.
We appreciate all your hard work, and you have many irons in the fire. Yeah, absolutely.
And we appreciate the audience. So thank y'all for joining us and being with us. Namaste. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining the Eyes of Indigo with Iris Carter and Margot Ross Sears. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Music is Arcadia by Kevin MacLeod. Find us at facebook.com/Eyes of Indigo, on YouTube under @Iris Carter Enterprises, and on various podcast aggregators. Copyright 2023 by